Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CBI's SME webinar, today focused on cybersecurity and delivered with our good friends at BT. Now, the purpose of today's session is really to understand the cybersecurity landscape, work through good practice for business and some of that digital hygiene, but of course, applying that SME lens to the conversation. Now, the format is as normal. We will hear from three fantastic speakers. One you can't see because he's our secret squirrel, but I will introduce him in a little bit. But we'll hear from three speakers who will give us a overview of cybersecurity from their perspective. Then we will go into a discussion. I've got a number of questions that have been sent in advance, but if you do have any questions you specifically want to ask, please go to the chat box, send in your questions, and we will do our best to get through them. If we can't get through them, as you know, we are very good at giving panelists homework, so we'll ask them for their response, and we will come back to you on that very personalised one-to-one service that Megan and Charlotte very kindly provide. Now, our speakers are, we've got Michaela Hart, who is Director for Security at BT. We've got Patrick Gahan, who is the Managing Director of Camway Technology. And we have got Jack S. I can't give a surname because he's from the National Cybersecurity Centre. And obviously has to keep a certain amount of anonymity. Sorry, that's a word that I could say perfectly in my head, but it's not coming out of my mouth this morning. Right, now, first up, we've got Michaela, Michaela from BT. And Michaela's going to be taking us through the landscape, the cybersecurity landscape from a BT perspective. What are they seeing? What are they seeing out there? Explaining some of the solutions as they see them and understanding what you need to understand as a business. Michaela will also talk us through how to maximize your security resource. So look, I will put myself onto mute, and Michaela, I will hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Deborah. Thank you very much for the introduction and the opportunity to speak. So I guess sort of we're sitting here against an interesting landscape. So cyber attacks are more prominent and far-reaching and impactful than ever before. From the major incidents that dominate front pages and cause geopolitical confrontations through to the plague of scam emails that actually as businesses and individuals we're dealing with on a daily basis, there's been a real constant increase in the volume of attacks over recent years. And actually, industry research suggests that UK businesses are now hit by a cyber attack on average every 45 seconds. And actually, here at BT, we've seen a 50% increase in malware traffic over the last 6 months. So things really are continuing to escalate. As a result, cybersecurity is now an issue that really all businesses are thinking about on a daily basis, whereas previously it was maybe something that was sort of the domain for larger businesses with dedicated IT teams. But now it really is an important consideration for businesses of all sizes. And definitely sort of after COVID and changes in ways of working in both our professional and our personal lives, people are really having to rethink actually their approach to cybersecurity. So security is really in BT's DNA. We've got over 70 years of history at the forefront of security in the UK, and it's actually inherent in everything that we do. Our network connects and protects the everyday activities that really enable modern life. We provide secure UK critical national infrastructure, and we're trusted by the organisations that are essential to our daily lives, including the emergency services, the armed forces, NHS and banks, for example. And the threat of cyber attacks comes from multiple actors, nation states, criminal organisations and lone hackers, and it's constantly growing. And the UK has to be able to defend its infrastructure, its people and its businesses in order to be secure and prosperous. And in response at BT, we have an industry-leading team of more than 3,000 security experts, and these experts actually protect both our own networks and data, and then also our global enterprise and consumer customers. On average at BT, we deal with around 6,500 cyber attacks a day on our network, and we regularly see up to 12 terabytes of data go across BT's network every second. Our cybersecurity platform processes 2 million events per second to proactively hunt for threats. That's 7.2 billion an hour. We also have ethical hacking teams, and we give them the remit to actually not just test our cyber security, but also our physical security and also the behaviour of human beings. So really important to understand actually human susceptibility to being social engineered, which can further compromise your cyber security and your digital assets. So we're committed to helping everyday users of the internet stay secure online, and we provide training and guidance to all our employees and to our customers. However, we recognise that more can be done, and so we actually support a number of programmes to help with this as well. So a couple of examples, this is our recent collaboration with the NCSC on the Cyber Aware programme, and more recently we launched the 159 service. This was a service we created in collaboration with Google and many of the high street banks for the reporting of suspected scams. So there's a number of things that we're doing both directly and indirectly to really help our customers. The global cybersecurity market is growing at a rapid pace. It's estimated at over 10% a year and forecasted to grow from 120 billion to 267 billion in 2028. And the impact of COVID has made security even more vital to the critical services that we depend upon every day. In this context, BT Security Unit is actually one of the fastest growing parts of our businesses, and we look after a number of customers from some of the world's best known brands, government departments, actually through to our smaller businesses across the UK as well. And one of the things that is actually common across customers of all shapes and sizes is it's actually basic hygiene and the fundamentals, if they're ignored, which can often leave people the most vulnerable to attack. So there's really a number of things that actually a business of any size should be doing to really protect their digital footprint. So the first thing is to actually understand the risks. It's crucial to know what different types of cybercrime and cyber attacks are, how to identify them, and how they could lead to sensitive data being stolen, to your website being taken down, through to actually your employees being blackmailed or extorted. And so taking the time to understand these attacks and know how to prevent them is really important. And actually the NCSC published some really good guidance on this if you take a look at their website. And then the next is really to get the fundamentals right. So that basic hygiene, as I mentioned, make sure that your operating systems and programs are updated to the latest version, and that will help to protect you against threats. Make sure that you have antivirus on all of your devices, and make sure that you have strong passwords for every single one of the accounts on your systems and your devices. And if you can, use multi-factor authentication where you're taking more than one step to log in. And then massively important is actually to back up your data. So all businesses, regardless of size, should take regular backups of their important data, and then you can know that it can be easily accessed and restored. So if you were to be compromised by something like a ransomware attack, you know that actually your data is safe and that you're keeping it either remotely in the cloud or on a separate computer away from your core computers that you're using every day. And then I guess a little bit about the security industry as a whole, because there's a lot of talk about it actually, there being a big cyber skills gap. There's actually more jobs available than people qualified to fill them. And for employers, this represents a huge challenge. But for professionals in the industry, it means there's also a big demand for their skills. BT are actually the UK's biggest private cyber employer, and we hire more people to scale our business, both to protect ourselves and our customers. And we're really committed to supporting the pipeline of future cyber professionals. And so we do this through a number of initiatives and programs. We run a large graduate program and apprentice programs to actually bring early career talent into our business. And it's also vital that we help people with transferable skills to enter the industry as well. So, for example, cybersecurity is a particularly good fit for military leavers due to their experience. And actually, we work very closely with the MOD, and at BT, we employ more veterans and reservists than any other UK company. So we're doing what we can to make sure that we have a scaled cyber professional team to protect both us and our customers. And then sort of just on a final note is really looking to the future. So the increased reliance on digital platforms was accelerated by COVID-19 with rapid adoption of new technologies. This created a much more complicated environment with more breakout points to the internet, more things connected to the internet, from printers to vending machines and autonomous vehicles. and then also massive adoption of cloud services, so more and more people putting data in the cloud. So the challenges are extreme and they continue to evolve at a frightening pace. BT have a holistic view of this. You know, we provide the UK's national network, and we have a network spanning 180 countries. And what this does is gives us essentially a ringside seat to global data traffic and actually cyber trends. And so this enables us to take a view and actually start to anticipate threats as they're emerging. And so the speed and scale of the threats mean that we need to adapt new techniques and policies. BT invests 60 million per annum on security research and innovation, and we're investing in things such as quantum key distribution, and then actually the utilisation of AI and machine learning so that we can start to predict cyber attacks before they unfold. So in summary, security is in BT's DNA. We invest heavily to ensure that we're the best positioned to protect UK businesses and consumers and ensure that they can thrive in this digital era. So Deborah, I'll hand back to you.
There you go. Sorry, that's me not doing well with the IT. No, thank you. It's fascinating, isn't it? The depth and breadth of BT is quite significant. And I think one of the questions I'm keen to come back to you on is around how you can support the customers and what people should be looking for from their service provider. Right, now I'm going to go over to Patrick from Camwe. Sorry, I said Camwe earlier, didn't it? It's Camwe, Patrick. So
No, it's
apologies.
Camway.
Camwe. Right, okay.
But with W-E-Y, so.
And I mean, Patrick is immersed in IT security, so he's going to be taking us through a very pragmatic approach to cybersecurity, like talking through users. We know users. We were actually just having a conversation before coming onto this about users being the weakest link, and also thinking through, you know, the explosion in terms of cloud, working from home, and decentralization that's happened in particular over the past nearly 2 years. Right. So Patrick, I'll pop myself onto mute and over to you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to speak. I think a number of points Michaela made will be echoed in what I'm going to talk about as well. But obviously we can't compete with the size and scale of BT. But Camwe are what I would describe as a boutique security partner. We've got a lot of cybersecurity skills in house, and we work with industry-leading vendors to deliver cybersecurity solutions to our customers, which range from anything from very small enterprises to businesses bigger than 10,000 user seats and so on. And to the topics I wanted to touch on today, the whole realm of cybersecurity can be overwhelming, really. I can appreciate for end customers, because there's just so many aspects to it, so many talk about different types of ever evolving threats and attacks, and so one can feel overwhelmed, but really we like to take it back to basics and just to get the basics right. If a company doesn't understand what key systems underpin their business, then they need to figure that out straight, you know, first and foremost, and take a risk-based view of how to protect those systems from attack, what the attacks are, you know, and how to protect that data. A lot of customers we deal with, sometimes they don't even know where their important data sits. You know, some of it's in the cloud, some of it's on premise, some of it's on people's laptops, or some of it's on a server in the cupboard. You know, so that it can be very varied. You know, in terms of how organized customers are about knowing where their important data sits. One of the other things that people often overlook is their relationships with third parties, because as is evidenced by recent supply chain hacks, if the supply chain is compromised, then, you know, companies that in that chain can be compromised also. And we're seeing a lot of interest in customers wanting to assess and understand the risk of the organizations they're working with in a smarter way, you know, because with the best will in the world, peddling spreadsheets and doing audits or point-in-time audits of third parties and suppliers doesn't give you a continuous view of the posture of these people you're working with. So really, in terms of getting the basics right, policies, understanding your data, and taking a risk-based approach to how you apply your effort in securing your business. And the next thing that I just wanted to touch on was that you know, there's a lot of talk about ever-evolving threats and lots of new ways to attack people or to attack businesses, and this is true. But having been in the cyber industry for about over 20 years, we hear a lot of the same stuff. It's almost like everything, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Fundamentally, it's vulnerabilities in people or systems are being exploited by threats, and that sort of law of the rule of the world is the same. The threats and how they exploit those vulnerabilities may change over time, but fundamentally, users remain a very weak link, and we really stress the importance of security awareness training for users. We've worked with some big organizations who have been, very much on it in terms of employee induction days. Security is an integral part to onboarding staff. It's an integral part to continuously training staff. Smaller companies, there are solutions out there for you too. There are processes, there's content, there's a lot of free content on cybersecurity training, not least by our friends in National Security Cyber Centre. But there are various other sources of cybersecurity awareness training. And what we would encourage people is not to overlook the user factor, because there's a temptation to look at product and think a product is going to save me and protect me. Really, we know anecdotally from our work with customers, we have deployed some enterprise grade Gartner leading solutions into companies, but if they choose not to educate the users, then these products can be circumvented by the actions of careless users. And the other thing, just on the changing nature of threats over the time, but how they often stay the same. There's the Open Web Application Security Project, which was founded in 2001, has listed for every year the top 10 threats against web applications. Those top 10 threats have basically stayed the same for 20 years. So it's just more to the point of things change, but they kind of stay the same. So focus on getting the user factor addressed, and obviously focusing on the basics. The last thing I just wanted to touch on was the decentralization of everything. As we know from the pandemic, people are working in the office less, but there was this really kind of prophesized by a forum called the Jericho Forum back in 2004, who talked about living on the web. This was a UK forum, discussing living on the web and what deperimeterization was going to mean for people. And that was really prophetic of where we are today, because everybody's got a mix of hybrid. We've got a lot of Office 365 services, Amazon, public cloud. So there's a mix of as a service, public cloud, on-premise, and it can be very difficult for customers to understand how do I address security in that context, because I haven't got a perimeter anymore that I can just build a wall around. So really the importance in that case, we put a lot of focus these days on endpoint security, endpoint detection, endpoint response, because the endpoints are effectively the devices that see all the traffic. It's harder nowadays to try and listen at a point in the network to analyze and pick up security threats. Whereas if we focus on good quality endpoint protection and controls, then we can because the users are in charge of those endpoints, we can certainly pick up a lot of poor user behavior, accidental infections before they get out of hand and before they infect other people. They also focusing on the endpoint also gives visibility into encrypted traffic, which we would not ordinarily have in an easy way off the network. So just a couple of takeaways, if you like, from those sort of three topics is, I would suggest that you don't have your head turned by shiny, sophisticated solutions, because if you haven't got the resources to deploy, configure, and manage them, you will almost certainly never see a proper return on your investment. Secondly, do not overlook the critical importance of security awareness training for your users, because they will be the weakest link, and you know, no matter what technical controls you have in place. And the last point was also mentioned by Michaela, and I think everybody on the panel would share that the importance of password management. We had a recent dealing with a recent customer attack, and their entire organization was effectively wiped out by ransomware. Not anything we had to do with, but simply because they weren't following good practice. But one of the things was their password safe. They had a password management tool, but it was also on the same infrastructure that the attackers encrypted with the ransomware. So it's only in a time of crisis that people realize the sort of weakness of their controls sometimes, or that they haven't thought through the recovery and incident management process of how do we get access to passwords if all our systems are down. You know, so there are some free open source password management tools, and there are also some paid ones which are enterprise grade and allow you to securely store all your passwords you know, in a safe place that you can get to in the time of an emergency. And it's really important that you can get to that password safe in a crisis. So back to you, Deborah. I don't have anything else to add.
Thank you, Patrick. And I think, yeah, that again, that human point keeps coming up, doesn't it? Right. So our final speaker is Jack S from the National Cybersecurity Centre, and Jack is going to be taking us through, you know, observations from the current threats as from the Security Centre, what they're seeing, advice and guidance for SMEs, and some of the free tools and services available. He's also got a presentation that we'll share after following this session, so that you've got that information to hand as well. So Jack, I will pop myself onto mute, and I know everyone's very keen to hear from you.
Yes, thank you very much. Great to be here, and you know, I think there's been some excellent points being made already that have somewhat shortened my brief, which is always very nice. So I think from our perspective, you will hear people talking about hackers, cyber criminals, nation states, activists, terrorists as potential attackers, and these are all kind of accurate descriptions of where this comes from. But I think sometimes it's useful to almost like go back to the reality of what's going on. So a really good analogy would be a kind of walking up the street, criminals kind of knocking on every door, testing every handle, checking every window. Is every single shed locked? And essentially just looking for weakness. And the reality of the kind of criminal threat these days is that that's absolutely what's going on. So, except they're not operating on a street, they're operating on the internet. And that means that rather than just a street, they're actually dealing with anything they can see on the internet. So when we talk about the criminal threat as a cyber criminal threat related to small organizations, I think it's easy for people to think, well, why on earth would we be targeted? And the reason you will be targeted is because you are on the internet. You have technology that is on the internet that can be scanned by cyber attackers. You have email addresses that can receive phishing attacks. And those two things happen at an industrial scale. People are just probing for weakness, and the cyber attackers don't really care who you are initially. What they care about is whether they can get access to your systems. And then the next point for them is how do they monetize it. So I think that's probably one of the most important things we can say for smaller SMEs, really, is don't assume that you won't be targeted. You will be. And I think Michaela from BT made some cracking points about volume and frequency that we absolutely agree with in terms of what we see. Patrick mentioned some really obvious changes, which I think are worth reinforcing. So, you know, the pandemic forced more and more people to work from home, remote access, and that change happened incredibly quickly during the pandemic. And over the last 18 months at the National Cybersecurity Centre, what we've seen is those changes that IT admins have made to make their employees' lives more easy. We've seen those be exploited by cyber criminals, obviously. So, examples include kind of opening up any company resources to remote access, letting people use their own device from home because obviously it's cheaper to do so. And I won't go into the technical details today, but the reality is that these types of changes can make life considerably easier for staff, but also obviously considerably easier for cyber attackers. Now, the most common outcome that we've seen has been really a real increase in ransomware attacks. Now, ransomware, for those that don't know, is a malicious type of software, or malware as it's called, which encrypts the victim's systems. And it often leaves the victim unable to operate any of their digital systems until either a ransom is paid, or those files are decrypted, or they entirely rebuild their network, or a mixture of those issues. And it's incredibly common. It causes significant disruption to businesses, and this remote working has made it much easier. And I think Patrick just made the point, and also Michaela, about patching and passwords. And the key enablers for ransomware are poor passwords on remote desktop connections, and a lack of patched systems, and poor passwords for email accounts that then enable people to get onto the network and gradually build up their access to the network in order to deliver ransomware. So those really basic things that we've already talked about are absolutely critical to preventing ransomware. Another very common attack type that we still see is business email compromise. This involves attackers gaining access to business email addresses, and then they are able to engineer things such as fraudulent payments, data theft, and as I just mentioned, sometimes even ransomware if they are on the network for long enough. And the key point here is that this is often enabled by the simplicity of the fact that most people just allow a username and a password to be good enough to get onto company resources. Now, there's two things in that. First of all, the passwords need to be good, but as Michaela mentioned earlier, multi-factor authentication is absolutely essential. And if you're letting people use bring their own device or bring your own device policy, you really need to think about any technical controls you can put in place to make that harder for them. So just moving on to kind of advice and guidance, I think the common theme in both ransomware and business email compromise is that actually implementing a really small number of critical defenses will significantly reduce your risk of being a victim. Patrick mentioned it himself a moment ago when he said that the vulnerabilities aren't changing. The things that are being exploited are still the things that were being exploited a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Where the change is how the criminals monetize it with things like ransomware. So good basics is absolutely essential. That's what all of our advice and guidance is really about. So we start with cyber which is the government's core advice on how to stay secure online. This is about separate passwords for your emails, how to create a strong password, where you should save your passwords to, turning on multi-factor authentication, keeping your devices updated, and backing up those devices. And as I said, those behaviors alone will actually raise the bar significantly in terms of how easy it is for an attacker to get access to your data. But we also have a portfolio that goes beyond that for SMEs, which is called the Small Business Guide. And this builds on those cyber-aware behaviors at a more kind of enterprise level. So it goes into backing up at a more corporate level. It talks about preventing malware and again, passwords, and preventing phishing attacks. We also have a response and recovery guide, and I think it's really important to accept that even if you put good controls in place, you still need to have a disaster recovery or business continuity plan in place, and we've got a step-by-step process for that on our website, which we'll provide afterwards. We've also got a free tool called Exercise in a Box, which you can go on and you can actually desktop through ransomware and other common types of attack and just see how you would react as a business. That some of the micro exercises can be done in under 15 minutes, so it's not a huge effort to go in there and check where you are. And then finally, I'd highlight Cyber Essentials, which is a government-backed scheme. This uses some core controls which are known to prevent the vast majority of common cyber attacks. There's actually a readiness tool for this on our website, so you can go in, you can put in some information about your business, and it will tell you kind of what else you need to do in order to achieve this certification. Some insurers take the Cyber Essentials certification as a good indicator for premiums, which is a really good thing. But the core thing about all of these bits of guidance is that attackers are simply looking for targets who don't have good defenses in place. So all of the advice and guidance that I've outlined briefly here, and we'll send around afterwards, is totally free. It will make you more resilient, and it's always best to put these measures in place beforehand rather than realizing after an incident's taken place that a small amount of investment up front could have prevented catastrophic data loss or financial loss. With that was very quick, aware of the time constraints, but I'll pass back.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you. And it's great to know there's lots of resource out there, and that the Cybersecurity Centre is there protecting us as well. Right, now to some of the questions. Michaela, I'm going to come to you first, because we've got some questions around, service providers and what can customers expect from their service providers in terms of helping them protect. What should a good service provider be offering?
So I think it's really important that what a service provider does is gives their customers access to affordable and meaningful services and solutions. And so I think things that provide enhancement to maybe the sort of IT systems that have already been adopted by customers, and also gives them access to skills to be able to support and supplement them. So, smaller businesses maybe won't have highly skilled security people on their staff. So I think sort of access to skills, and then also access to services that are really meaningful. And so addressing some of those basics that sort of Patrick and Jack and myself already talked about. So things like providing an add-on to an internet connection, a denial of service offering to prevent sort of DDoS attacks, offering maybe configuration advice, management and monitoring of firewalls, web security, endpoint security, for example, and maybe also offering things like secure backups so that you can actually take that as a service rather than have to think about doing that yourself. And I think another thing is actually access to professionals, access to skills. So for example, one of the things that BT offers and many other service providers offer is almost a maturity assessment. So, there is the Cyber Essentials from the NCSC, but actually then taking that to the next level and looking at sort of your business specifically, your adoption of digital technology, and sort of, are you ready for that, and do you have the right things in place to essentially look after your people and your data. So I think the important thing is that, the service providers make them accessible, easy to consume, affordable and complementary to what you already have.
From what you've described now, I'd say it's actually a partnership, isn't it? It's in everyone's interests, and a service provider that is going to support you through this, because it is a bit of a minefield, and it's something I think a lot of people know that's important, but sometimes shy away from having some of these conversations. I mean, just in terms of, you outlined sort of really well what you should look like from what a service provider, the sort of types of services are. What sort of questions should you ask a service provider? When you're thinking about a new service provider, what are the questions that maybe you would want to be considering? And perhaps if I could come to Michaela and Patrick and Jack, perhaps in turn on that.
Okay, so I think that the questions you're asking is really what inherently is the service provider doing to make sure that the services they provide to you are insecure by design? Because I think one of the important things here is that, sort of security shouldn't be an add-on or an afterthought. It's actually really important that it's inherent in any services that they're providing to you. And then I think it's about asking them, what they help you to do in both the planning of actually what defenses you should deploy, and then what they would actually do for you in the, and I say in the event of a breach. It is a matter of when, not if, for most businesses, because the attacks are so prevalent of businesses of all size and scale. So I think understanding how they'll support you in response is a really important thing to ask them as well.
is a very good point, as you say. It's and we've all had the emails from one of our where we're a customer where it's like, to let you know there's been a breach. So it is, as you say, it's prevalent, and it happens to every brand that many of us know. So Patrick, if come to you, is there anything, you know, when you're thinking about, you know, looking at services and providers, there are questions that you would be advising your clients to be asking?
Yeah, I think clients need they need the right advice to feel, I guess, open to choose different service providers for different functions if they need that. You know, perhaps one doesn't fit all, one size might not fit all. We tell that to customers as well from a vendor perspective. If they're looking at, you know, vendor A, and that vendor tells them all our products will secure you from, you know, top to bottom.
Be warned if that ever happens.
Yeah, exactly. You know, red flag. You know, all vendors are not the best at all things. So it's about trying to find out, okay, incident response or endpoint protection or technical controls or policy-based stuff, you know, security awareness, cherry picking the right services from the right providers, and not necessarily advocating a one provider for everything type approach, I think can benefit companies. And obviously it'll totally depend on the size and the structure of the organization in question, or the complexity of them, you know. So yeah, and that's what we advocate as well with the solutions we work with. It's not one solution for everything. It's trying to cherry pick the right things for the right customer.
Great, thank you. Jack, have you got anything else you'd like to add to that?
I think one thing that's really important in this area is understanding where the supplier's responsibility ends and where yours begins. So if we were to take the example of a software as a service supplier, you know, lots of assumptions are made that supplier will take responsibility for elements of security operations that they may not actually contractually be required to do. So, for example, if you were being provided with an email service, you might assume that if there were 5,000 attempted logons to your accounts, that they might take care of that. But actually, if it's not in the contract, then they might not. So our advice would be always to just understand where their responsibility ends and where yours begins, because that's the essential part of security, making sure that nothing falls between the gaps.
Thank you. I'm just sort of conscious of time, and I know the sort of one question that's quite hot is around, you know, what do you do if you're a victim of cyber attack? So what I might do is, Jack, I might come to you in that first instance, and then Michaela, and then Patrick, if you've got anything to that hasn't been touched on. So, Jack, you know, what do you do? You've got a cyber attack. What do I do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few key things to understand. So first of all, you've got your kind of legal aspects to it. So are you going to report it to the police? Are you going to, so Action Fraud is the place to report it to in order to get a crime reference number. If you're in a period where your business is actually suffering direct disruption, then by all means report it to us at the National Cybersecurity Centre, and we can provide help 24 hours a day at a very basic level to ensure that you're taking the right steps. And then you also need to consider kind of regulatory compliance. So if personal data is being taken, then you need to be considering what you're going to be reporting to the data commissioner on that front. At a more kind of tactical level, you need to understand what's happening, how you're being disrupted, and what mitigation measures you can take. Ideally, you will have a business continuity plan that you can put into action, and that will help you to make the right decisions in the right order to deal with the incident effectively. If you have, and in many cases, small businesses won't have a cyber incident response contract in place. So it's really, really important in those situations that you have exercised or have some idea of who's responsible for what. And then afterwards, we always think about ensuring that you do some lessons learned, understand what happened, how it happened, and how you prevent it taking place in future. Often, from a budget point of view, after an incident is the best time for people to try and acquire additional budget to make sure that type of incident doesn't happen again. We really wish it was the other way around and that the budget was given up front, but it's a reality that people often react after the case. But what I will say is there's a huge amount of free guidance on our website that goes into much more detail than that. So please do take a look at that afterwards.
Great, thank you. Michaela, have you got anything further you would add to that? So thinking about, what
No,
to
I
do
think
if
the
you're
only
that.
thing that I would add, and actually, oh, sorry,
Sorry,
I think no, the only thing I would is to not be afraid to ask for help. And actually, I'm going to quote, I think it was the annual report from the NCSC last year, where they said actually, cyber security is a team sport. So don't feel that you have to deal with it and resolve it on your own. So know who your trusted parties are, know who you're going to reach out to, and actually ask for help, because the critical thing is how you deal with it in the moment, how you recover from it, and then to the point that the lessons learned and the future investments off of the back of it. And I think, as well as having a business continuity plan, it's almost having an approach where you can actually measure and think about what your cyber risk looks like, and therefore what you need to do to improve your posture.
Thank you. That's very sage advice. And Patrick, it's a tricky one when you're following the Cybersecurity Centre and the head of security at BT. But have you got anything else you would add
Very
to
tricky.
that?
I just say don't panic. And I have to admit that came from the NCSC site as well. That's a critical thing. Don't panic. We've had customers panic, and the first thing they do is delete the machine that was compromised, virtual machine, just delete it from total existence, and then you've got no chain of evidence. You've got nothing to analyze. So panic happens a lot, but I would encourage people not to panic. And know who as Michaela said, know who your trusted advisors are. Don't run out to the open industry and say, help me. You should already have an idea who you're going to pick up the phone to. And really essential is a communications plan internally to know who's going to lead the response and how they get hold of all the right people, because some of these attacks take out all the, people rely on VoIP phone systems now. They completely take that out. So even simple things like lists of mobile numbers and a chain of command of who's going to be in charge in the recovery is very important.
All right, thank you. Very good advice. Right, I'm very conscious of time, and we always say we finish on time. We've got less than 1 minute to the finish time. So, look, I'm going to say thank you. Thank you very much to Michaela, to Patrick and Jack, but especially to Michaela and BT team for helping making sure this session happened and helping us bring together this fantastic group of experts. We'll be doing follow-up. Well, I say we. Megan will be doing follow-up following this with all the sort of resources that are available. So please make use of those. And really just to wish you a great rest of the week and weekend when it arrives in a couple of days. So it's a bit of a long way. But and register for the CBI annual conference if you haven't already, because it's got a stellar lineup that we're not actually allowed. It's like secret squirrel stuff like Jack. We're not allowed to say who it is yet, but do register because it is a great lineup. So we'll get Megan to include the registration details for that, and if you're CBI member, it's all complimentary. So right, thank you very much. Take care everyone, and see you soon.